take me through. So, college sounds like you kind of hit your stride. They figured out how to make the most out of your training and what you were doing. And that sounds like that pretty well set the course and like got you on the right track and got your head straight for the, moving forward as an adult. Yeah.
Not yeah, with as a person, yeah, not with running. I did not run at Haverford College, so I quit running. Wrote a letter I didn't enjoy writing to the coach who had recruited me. Said I won't be running there after all. And then only got back into running kind of in my late 20s. Like yeah, so it's a good like 10-year hiatus.
Yeah.
And it was only because I just happened to I moved to San Francisco for no particular reason, and got a job. I wanted to have a career as a writer, and I got a job with a startup endurance sports magazine called Multisport. And at that time, like I was overweight, I was out of shape, I wasn't running, but I was suddenly surrounded by endurance athletes all the time, and I did have that background in running, and so it was just kind of the classic slippery slope,
Yeah.
I got sucked back in.
I think it's probably good for people to hear that, someone like yourself. And, I think a lot of folks that I talk to, kind of take it at face value, maybe that if you are someone who's been in this space for a long time, it has always been just kind of up and out, right? That you've always been a runner and you've always been fast and whatever the adjective is. And I think it's just great to reiterate that, life is dynamic, and, you had a dip for a long period of time and, had these things happen and recommitted. And, I've certainly experienced the same things, and, athletic identities change and so on. So, that's I just think that's a good reminder, that we all are just trying to, stay consistent, in whatever way that form that takes. I want to fast forward, or maybe I guess jump ahead to something that I'm really interested to have you expand on, which is your battle with long COVID. This is something that has hit me personally. My wife has been dealing with this for years,
Mhm.
and it's been really, really challenging, both in terms of kind of her and her goals and how she feels, as well as just the narrative around it. No one. It's been hard to find people to really address it and to even kind of give it credence, or
Yep.
and so tell me about your experience with it, and what that's been like and where you're at today with it.
Yeah, that's actually that is a fast forward, but it's there's a natural segue because when I got COVID in February, pretty early February 2020, I was 48, close to turning 49, and I was still really getting after it competitively as a runner. Just like chasing big goals and really committed to performance and still enjoying it. And this is now more than 20 years after I had started the second chapter of my life as a runner. And I'll always regret that decade that I wasn't running. I lost some prime years there, but I have to think, like, if not for that long hiatus, I wouldn't have been as hungry as I was still, like into my late 40s. So I think that's the silver lining, and also like a good lesson. Regret's healthy to a point, but it's better to be forward looking and to use it. So anyway, like that's where I got COVID, like running the Atlanta Marathon in 2020. I did really well. Like I won my age group, and came home sick, and then kind of never got better. Actually, I did have like a false recovery, but then the chronic symptoms started to set in. And it was so like weirdly wrong, some of the stuff. Your wife can attest to this. Like, just something in me knew I was in for a long haul. Like I just knew this was like serious and life changing, and it has turned out to be exactly that. So I basically lost the next 4 years. Would try a little bit to run, and it just always blew up in my face. And the consequences are just so disproportionate to the conservative little tests you do,
Sure.
see what you can tolerate, that I just learned to, I'm like, you know what, I'm good. um, but then, at the beginning of this year, I wasn't running at all, had not been running at all, couldn't run as far as I knew, and just decided to sign up for a 100-kilometer ultra marathon, which was like 10 months away, or yeah. Um, and my attitude was like, I'm just going to figure this out. And that actually led to like a lot more progress than I had made in the preceding 3 years. I finished the ultra that was at the end of October. And now I'm just sort of like trying to find my footing. Like, that's one thing about long COVID is like, it's ever changing. Wherever you are with it is probably a little different from where you've been at any point in the journey.
Mm-hmm.
So, which makes it hard to like identify patterns that you can use in like a cause effect sort of way. But yeah, I feel very, very grateful. I mean, I'm nowhere near where I used to be, but I can run now. I ran for 2.5 hours here in Flagstaff just 2 days ago. So I thought I would never be able to do anything like that again. So
That's gotta be, I mean, that's gotta be a big hit. I mean, coming from, doing really well, specifically the like inflection point was like a performance-based goal
right.
where you're feeling really good, and then the bottom falls out, and then you can't run for a very long period of time. How, I mean, how did you navigate that? That's got to be a blow to just kind of that athletic identity, if you were
Yeah.
still riding high from feeling good in training.
Yeah. I mean, I have like a cultivated stoical streak. So when I got sick and I knew like, I'd been stripped of my ability to run, and that this was going to be my future. um I was really focused as much as I could be on like being as okay. Like I didn't actually put as much effort into trying to get better as a lot of long haulers do, because um I it seemed like a pretty big, it seemed chancy to me, because like there was no cure. Nobody knew, like if you just had to go through a bunch of known steps, of course I would have put everything I had into to take those steps, but there was no roadmap. So I thought for me, like the better bet was just to focus on like being okay as I was. It's a big part of the reason I decided to create Dream Run Camp. You know, I thought, okay, well, if I can't be the star of my own running movie now, like maybe I can be, the supporter, and pour into other runners. So my wife convinced my wife to sell her home in California, where we've been forever, move here to Flagstaff, open up Dream Run Camp, and just like pivot toward service. It was an adjustment, because like I've got this like big old 12 passenger van, and every morning I would load it up with, the current crop of runners, take them somewhere beautiful to run. They would all go scatter off into the forest, and I would just walk or even sit.
Yeah.
Um, but I think, so I have no regrets, honestly, because the experience has strengthened me. I've grown a lot. I've turned lemons into lemonade. Like I don't know if I would have created Dream Run Camp, which I'm just absolutely loving, if not for the illness. But back to your question, yes, it was a big hit, and I didn't really. I was so focused on like finding the positive that I didn't really allow myself to fully appreciate like just how grievously I had been wounded, as a person, until I was able to start running again. And just even little bits of like being able to run a mile without stopping felt just like euphoric. And I'm like, wow, no wonder nothing could really replace this. Just like try as I might, nothing could really scratch a certain itch the way running did. So yeah, it was a lot.
Give me a little, I'm curious. I mean, how did you, it's really interesting, you said that kind of like stoic approach, because I can imagine that that's what was required. There's nothing you could do about it. So you kind of had to settle in and just make the best of what you had control over. But how, not everyone would have that, be able to land on that mindset. And so I'm curious, Like, what were some of your goals? I mean, how did that affect your goals? You know, like tactically, were you like, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, or did you leave it more open ended? Like, how did that shift your day to day kind of engagement with just like physical activity or, good well
Yeah.
being?
Uh, I just really, I mean, for me, like I've always been just passion driven. Like, when I like something, I love it. And when I love it, I throw myself into it. And I mean, let's be honest. I mean, in an alternative version of my life, I might have never discovered running. But I think I still would have had that passionate nature. So what I told myself was like, I don't really need running. Like I have a long history with it. Yeah, its benefits are obvious, but like I just need to find other ways to express my passion and just my zest. uh, so that's what I did. So like for me, like yeah, for sure, I was scratching and clawing at the beginning, like trying to give up as little ground as possible. So initially I mean the interesting thing is like it was because I was a runner that I realized something was wrong with me as early as I did. If I the first signs were like just biffing workouts that for no good reasons, or like weird heart rate behavior during runs. So like the first thing I did was like, well, I eliminated everything high intensity and everything prolonged, but I kept running. It's like I was a 13 workouts a week type of person, 15 to 20 hours a week of exercise. So initially I just like transferred it, like, all right, and I'll just like do everything easy now. And then like I just kept getting worse and worse. So then I eliminated all running, but I was still like walking 5 miles a day and lifting weights. And I just like kept up, and still I was getting worse. So I just kept up like giving up more and more ground. And eventually I got to a like kind of like a what's the point mindset. And I think that was actually healthy. I think to some people close to me, it looked like I was giving up, but I was really trying to put that belief to the test that I could live without like that kind of physical expression that I had always been accustomed to. So it was actually right before I signed up for that ultra in like the last half of 2023 when I really let myself go. Like I just stopped even thinking about exercise. Like, I mean, I would walk, if it was just something to do, but I mean, I would get to the end of the day sometimes and realize, oh, I actually did no exercise today. And it never even crossed my mind. Like it just like, that was just so far from, just a few years before, like the guy who would like, I would go to great lengths, to not miss a workout. But I think I just needed to really let go to that degree because I really hadn't given up. Like, I was pretty happy with the new life I had created for myself, like very focused on serving others, still writing, just getting into the entrepreneurial stuff. But yeah, so that was really it. Just like just trying to like, just because with running, I used to wake up every morning when I had a big goal in front of me, just excited for the day's possibilities. And I was just trying to like get back there with a different formula. And
Sure.
halfway succeeded.
Yeah. That's wild. I mean, that's just so incredible to I mean, I have a ton of respect for that mindset because I've been in versions of that just with injury or different thing, COVID, where you're like these what feels like fairly long periods where you just can't, you can't do the things you're used to doing. And but I'll be the first to admit, like I was not able to be as zen about it as you were, which is really admirable because I think there is a part of that where that resolve gives you a lot of or like the resolution to just settle into where you're at opens up a lot of freedom to just put that energy elsewhere, like if you can't change it, and so it strikes me, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts, like even with with athletes and injury, something kind of a baseline thing that we all deal with. You spend a tremendous amount of energy trying to get back to where you were at versus maybe just settling in and focusing on like being where you're at really well and trying to hone that experience. It's like, is there a corollary there? Like, do you see, am I off base, or is that like ring true and from your perspective?
Yeah, it rings true. I mean, like I had some dark days. Don't
Sure.
get me wrong. Like for me, it was like, yeah, one other thing I was trying to work on is like to decouple my mental state from my physical state. So, not being able to run wasn't so bad if I felt okay, but like I had, most of the time I did not even feel okay. Like, like I was just like intensely uncomfortable. Like, the malaise symptom, which everyone thinks is fatigue, and it's just not.
Hmm.
It's like deeply unpleasant. It's like kind of like a migraine or something. Like you're not actually feeling pain, but it's that unpleasant. So it's like the story of your day when it's going on. And you know, I had limited success in like being able to like be really okay mentally when I was like really feeling like crap physically. But one thing that did help me cope with like how it affected my running was the fact that I used to get injured all the time. Before I got sick, like I would just, I would sneeze and get plantar fasciitis somehow. So like I had running taken away from me many, many times before, like sometimes for like in terms of like being able to compete for years at a time, like, just like just like overuse, like kind of like tendon lingering chronic tendon issues that would just like wipe me out for a while. So not as extreme because I could always exercise and I did triathlons, so I didn't mind swimming or cycling, so I had that, but still, like I had gotten used to like losing the ability to run temporarily.
Hmm.
So that definitely helped a lot. So I mean, the psychology absolutely does overlap between the two.
Yeah. It feels like it makes me think about so you have a forthcoming book called Chasing Mastery. It's coming out in March. And it it feels like there's a piece of what you're talking about that is heading in that direction. And
Mhm.
so what's, if any, what's the tie-in with mastery and how you navigated this time period? We'll call them setbacks, I guess,
Yeah.
for lack of just a catch-all phrase.
Yeah. Yeah, another good segue. Yeah, mastery to me, it's a democratizing way to look at the developmental process in sport because the classic way, like if I asked you like what does it mean to be good at running, most people are going to answer, well, it means like you're faster than everyone else or you're faster than most people. So it's like a performance based way of like judging prowess in a sport. But for me as a coach, like I don't really put too much on performance because big parts of it are not under anyone's control. Like factors like your genetic makeup, your age. You can't do anything about these things that have a huge influence on performance. So I like to focus on the part that is within an athlete's and a coach's control. And so that's what mastery is. Like so, there's potential and then there's fulfillment of potential. Like if you're born with great potential, wonderful, but don't pat yourself on the back for that because it's just luck. What's much more impressive to me is reaching your like developing your potential. So everyone starts out with a certain amount, and then then it's really a competition to see who's best at developing what they've got. This is why currently today, I think this is still the case. There's not a single American record um, held in any running event by, at the senior level, the adult elite level, um, by a person who also set an American record as a junior. So it's just like
Wow.
the best youth athletes, and it's not just running, it's every sport. Um, the best youth athletes are very seldom statistically the best adult athletes. And it's because like you're going from the beginning to well into the developmental process. So yeah, you have to have something to start with, but it's way more like what do you do with what you're given. And that's a game like anyone can play. It doesn't matter. You could have no talent at all for running. And if you love it and you want to see what you can do, you're like, you can sort of win the competition for fulfilling your potential. So that's what mastery is all about. And you can see, I guess, the connection is, I mean, for me, one of the things I love about running is that growing as a person helps you grow as a runner. Like even if all you really care about is performance, like you want to work on yourself because it's like it's your whole self that is doing the training and the racing and the other elements of it.
Yeah, I've long, just my personal stance, of what I've taken away from being involved in endurance sports for 30 years is, like fitness is a great byproduct, right? Like there's so much more that you get in the pursuit of these things, your potential and these events and all, and that wasn't clear to me when I was young and all I wanted to do was go fast. But as I've
Right.
stayed in it, I'm like, oh, this really has tremendous impact, really over and above just my physical self,
Yeah.
far reaching in the other areas of my life. And oh,
Mhm.
by the way, yeah, feeling good physically is great. Like,
Yeah.
fitness feels good, but yeah, it's something that I've I really spend much less time chasing now, and really just recognize that, if I stay consistent, it just impacts everything in the positive way. And whatever fitness needs to do, it can kind of, go about its way.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it sounds like too. I want to come back to the book because there's some really interesting points that I want you to break down. But I know too that I want to read your motto for Dream Run, which is let your passion, not your ability, decide how far you'll go. And that's what you're just talking about, right? It's like, what do you do with your potential? Like you can have it, but if you don't show up for it. So um yeah, I mean, what's that mean to you? Like, give me a bit more of like that motto and how that's manifested in your own life, as well as like the people that you work with.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that's cool about operating Dream Run Camp, so this is like everyone's familiar with the traditional model of the adult running camp, where like everyone shows up to some cool destination on a Thursday or Friday. They meet each other, they run, they eat good food, and then they all scatter on on Sunday. So 3 to 4 days, like very like highly programmed, like just you got stuff one thing after another. um Dream Run Camp is more like well, we operate year round and on a small scale with what I call rolling attendance, which means come whenever you want, as long as we have a space for you. And our minimum stay is 1 week, and you can stay for up to 12 weeks. So the idea is like you get a little bit of a taste of like living like a pro athlete, just coming to Flagstaff and hanging out for a bit. And like that whole concept was based on an experience I had back in 2017 when I talked our mutual friend Ben Rosario into allowing me to be a tag along, basically embed myself with the Hoka Northern Arizona Elite professional running team. At that time, I was 46 years old, had never been an elite runner myself. But I wanted to do like my version of George Plimpton's Paper Lion and just like, have like a middle-aged everyman, just like mix it up with the pros. And it was just an incredible experience, transformative for me as a runner, but also just the best 13 weeks of my life. And so what I did there was I basically, I just gave myself permission to go all the way with running, which, I mean, realistically, like pretty much no one does that except for the pros. Like they're incentivized to do it, whereas for the rest of us, there's lots of barriers. So a lot of us like dream of like, oh, it'd be so cool if I could just like, not for 10 years, but like maybe for like just a season to be able to like completely have my entire life revolve around running, and just like to treat myself to that. So I for whatever reason I gave myself that permission. I just kind of barged right through the barriers, and then I wanted to make a version of that experience available to anyone who wants it. So that slogan for Dream Run is that is our ethos. Like we're trying to bring down those barriers. Oh, I'm too slow. I'm too old. I'm too new to the sport. I'm too whatever. Like those aren't really like I don't feel like it is a great reason not to go down that path. But like, I'm too slow is not, like if you're passionate and you want to improve, like someone should be giving you permission and an opportunity to just go for it.
That's so good. I love that. again, I mean, that ties in to the yeah, just this idea or the sentiment that we were talking about or kind of revolving around, which is just like, the sum total of the effort is really what matters, right? Like maybe even less about, and not that improvement in your fitness isn't valuable, but the takeaways when you give yourself permission are really far reaching, and so I mean, I love that, like just that the language specifically that you're using, they're like, yeah, like you should go for it, right? You should reap the benefits of an experience that allows you to go deep. Whereas a lot of us, like you said, we're just all barriers, right? We're just trying to figure out, well, okay, well, this thing's in my way and I'm busy and I got the, and we don't get that. Just on the other side of that, it's this whole other world where you can just, even if for a short period of time, you could go deep. And I think there's even just that sentiment, if people could implant that into their lives so that they can allow themselves to kind of go deep in whatever capacity makes sense for them, I think that would be transformative versus focusing on the barriers, which are easy. Like you said, like, I'm tired, I don't feel like it. Okay. But there's this other angle here that maybe we should look at. So again, I want to go back to chasing mastery. And this is a topic that I'm fascinated by. It's something that has really, I just did we released a podcast on this a few weeks ago. It was one of our first episodes of 2025, and some of it just around my own experience with this. And so it's a topic that I'm fascinated by, because we chase the newest, latest, greatest, right? And it is hard to double down and kind of just focus on being good at things. So you break down 5 pillars in the book. Can you give me as much detail as you would like without giving the book away, or if you want to give the book away? But I'd love to know. I started to read those pillars and the outline of them, and it really resonated with me, and just some of the thoughts and feelings that I have had around my own journey with mastery, and just really trying to kind of get rid of some of extraneous things, and focus on that. So what is that? Yeah, give me those 5 pillars and walk us through that process.
Sure thing. Yeah. So what I do in Chasing Mastery is I present like a developmental model for, getting from day one as an endurance athlete to mastery. And mastery really, I mean, you can define it in a couple different ways, but I mean, in terms of like what it looks like, it's when you can look yourself in the mirror and say, there's nothing else I could possibly do to improve as as an athlete at this point. Like, I am as good at this stage in my journey. Like, I am as good as I could possibly be. I got to that place for myself. It took like a very long time. And I was actually past my physical prime when I got to the point where I felt like I had mastered the sport of running. So I wasn't setting PRs, but I was actually better at running in that way. Just like, I just felt like, and it's a great feeling, it's easy to focus on like the outcome, like what you get for mastery, but similar to like how being fit feels good, like being that in control of like what you do as an athlete feels great too. I got to the point where I would be on the start line of like an Ironman triathlon or an ultra marathon, where I knew I was just in for hours of pain, and I would just be completely calm, like no nerves at all, like just eager and excited, like definitely engaged. And what a great way to start a race, right? Like, I used to be like so nervous I would throw up, before races. So yeah, that's all of what it entails. So it's a developmental process, and we all start at the same place, and we just see how far we get. So it's a matter of like, psychologists have like these needs-based developmental models, like Maslow's famous hierarchy. So it's like when you don't have anything, when you're just beginning, like, what do you need most? Like, what do you need first? And in endurance sports, I believe that's motivation. Like, you need to fall in love with the sport. You need to develop a passion. I think a lot of coaches would say, oh, you need to learn the X's and O's. It's like, actually, like, that's important, but it doesn't do you any good at all if you're teaching the X's and O's to an unmotivated athlete. So, So that's step one. Because like, it's a long, hard road to get to the point where you are as good at your sport as you could possibly be. You can't get there without, a high level of sustained motivation. Not that you can't have like, ebbs and flows, but you need to love it, and you need to be hungry. So as a coach, that's my first order of business. When athletes, newer runners, start working with me and they're like, oh, what's the workout I should be doing? It's like, the one you love, the,
Sure.
the one that's most fun. Like that really is my focus. But when that piece is in place, you continue to nurture it, but then like another need will become, prepotent. And for me, that the next one is, the learning piece. Like just there's so much to learn. Even in a sport as simple as running, I mentioned, my way of training when I was self-guided, inspired by my dad's, Boston Marathon, was to like race 6 miles or time trial 6 miles every other day. Like that's what made sense to me. And, I had to learn that like, that's not an effective way to get better at running. But that's all of us. Like you have to learn all kinds of stuff, like how to do a warm up, how to like execute an interval session, like what a fartlek is, all this. And so that's very important. Just, the motivation is the foundation, but you need to learn. And then from there, like when you just get to a deeper level of maturation, and for me as a coach, like I'm always trying to pull athletes along in this process, because it only really gets fun, I think, when you get deeper into it, because you're really sort of like handing the reins gradually to the athlete, because to be the best athlete you can be, like you have to be in control. You simply do. You can't be the best athlete you can be if you're entirely dependent on a coach to tell you what to do at every decision point. Like that's not how it works. It's all about self-control, self-regulation. So like, yeah, once you've been taught and you know how to do things, then you phase into like an understanding phase. And that's when you learn kind of like the why, or the logic behind. So it's one thing if I say like, you shouldn't do 2 hard days in a row. All right, an athlete can follow that instruction. But if you want to bring them on to, further in the developmental process, you tell them why. And so they understand the reasoning about, separating harder efforts and allowing recovery and blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly you've equipped, not suddenly, but like now you've equipped an athlete to make their own decisions at various points, and they're always going to have to make their own decisions. And then from there you get into what I call like the individuation stage. And now like, this is stage 4. So you're like pillar number 4, you're well along in the process. And that's where you start off by, for me as a coach, where do you start with an athlete? Like they've just hired you, you're starting to train them. You don't know that much about them. Of course, you have an intake form and such, and they can share their training logs. But let's be real, you don't really know that athlete yet. So the starting point is just you give them what works for pretty much everyone. Just like generic, this is what we know. And then try that out on them, and then begins a process of work of discovering that athlete's like individual optimal formula, which is not going to break any of the unbreakable rules that are out there, but you're still going to find your own special place, within that framework, which takes time. But it's fun, when athletes are sort of ready to like enter into that phase where they're really just learning about themselves now. Like they've learned about the sport, now they're learning about themselves, and they can just, tweak things. I say this all the time. Like if you looked at the training logs of like the 20-ish runners I'm coaching now, you wouldn't think they're all coached by the same coach, because like methodologically they're all over the place. Like there's definitely a backbone underneath all of them, but like that's the result of individuation. Where you just, you start at a kind of generic place, and then you just chisel away until you've got like the perfect recipe for that individual athlete. And then like the final stage is what I call the challenging phase. And that's where like an athlete, they're pretty much at the mountaintop at this point. They're, they have just that feeling of just being in control of themselves in the sport context. And what they really need now is to not get complacent, which kind of can happen. It's like the last hurdle that the athletes will trip over. Like they're feeling their funk, And so they need to be like, they need to keep challenging themselves, so that they're not coasting, and then, you know, and then also being challenged, so that they can keep growing.
So good. Oh man, I love that. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited for the book again. That's right up my alley. I want to go back to a couple of things you said that I think are will stand out to people, and so I want to call them out. You said you had not you weren't setting PRs, but you had mastered running, and I think that statement is not. I hear what you're saying, but you know, if we have like an age group athlete listen to this, like, how is that possible? You mean to tell me that your physical performance wasn't at its peak, but you were at your peak as an athlete?
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, I think, but
Mhm.
tell me, break that down for those that are listening who are like, that's there's no way those things exist in the same ecosystem, Matt. What did that what like what were some of the specifics that let you know you had master running? You talked about the nervous energy before a race. Give me a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think probably the best way to make that concrete is to just say a little bit more about the ultra marathon I ran this year. So, you know, I signed up for that race at midnight on New Year's Eve after having a few drinks. And like I said, like I was not running at all. And as far as I knew, like running was just toxic for me. And yet,
Yeah.
and so, you know, the longest foot race I ever completed was 50 miles. I made one attempt to run 100K. Actually, it was right before I got COVID, and DNF'd. You know, I bailed out at like 38 miles of the Black Canyon 100. So like, you know, here I was like not able to run, like really kind of sick, like I'm not feeling good, signing up for a race that was longer than any race I had successfully completed when I was younger, healthier, and fitter. And for me, like the reason that made sense was because I felt like I had mastered my sport. So, you know, I actually had a couple medical researchers like study me because, like, as far as anyone knew, no one this sick had ever sick in this way, had ever attempted anything like this before. So it was just an opportunity for science to learn, like, just what will happen to this guy. So, you know, I was attempting something that on the face of it looked impossible. And that's exactly what the attraction was to me. I felt like if anyone can pull this off, it's me. You know, the guy who looks in the mirror and tells himself he's mastered the sport. Well, here's one way to prove it. And so, you know, the process was the process. It was beautiful and it was ugly. And like, yeah, you know, I came this close to not even making it to the start line, and showed up at the start line feeling like I had the bare minimum preparation to make it even like a remote possibility that I could finish the race. But again, it was like me against the world, and I liked my chances, just because like it's kind of like a confidence. Like if you genuinely mastered your sport, you just have, you know it. You cannot not know it. And there's just a natural, it's not bravado, it's just like a natural confidence that comes out of that. It's like I can figure this out. And so that's what the race looked like. You know, I just like everything I had ever learned, every way I had ever grown as an athlete, it took all of that for me to get to that finish line. And I'm sorry, like, you know, I ran a lot of good races when I was younger, fitter, and healthier, but I never got that much out of myself in any race. So like I went in there having much less to give physically, and I got every last drop out of, like, people who were, you know, I had a large crew there supporting me. They will tell you, like, you know, like I didn't leave a drop of potential. So that's an extreme example of what I'm talking about. Like, we're not even talking about like being fast past your physical prime now. For me, like I know a lot of runners would look at that journey and say, like, what's the point of that? You know what I mean? Like you're tarnishing your legacy. Like, you know, you're so slow now. And for me, like it was exactly the same drug. Yeah, I would have preferred to be more competitive, but for me, the drug was like after the race is only going to last, some hours. Like, then you're sitting with it for the rest of your
Yeah.
life. And like, I wanted to be able to sit with my memories of that race and say, yes, like, could not have done any better. Mistakes were made, but like, I got everything I had to give out of myself.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that, because I mean, that resonates on a very deep level for me personally, just with some of the different experiences and highs and lows and things, where, yeah, you just squaring up against the goal of reaching your full potential, and knowing, in having that not so distant memory of like a different physical body, but the again, like the sum total of the effort is still just so valuable. I mean, some of my races that I remember most fondly are the ones I was either the slowest in, and or shared with great people, right? Like the ones I don't, I have some great wins, but I was out front, like I have some great memories of doing ultra marathons with some buddies that I spent an entire summer training with. We trained 5 days a week together and had some great days in the mountains. And and that means more to me than, and we were not, we were mid-pack, right? And we were middle-aged. So like it was just, and it was great. So that's, I appreciate you sharing that, because it is easy. It's just easy to keep it's easy to lose sight of that, in a performance-based endeavor. Yep. With lots of stuff coming at people about how you should or shouldn't go fast and the things you should do. Like, I think the appreciation of the process in whatever the end goal is really what matters, right? That to me always, again, I haven't always been in this headspace, but that feels like what matters. Like, that's what keeps me in it. I know I'll be a lifetime athlete if that's my mindset, in the whatever dips and valleys, and if I'm power hiking the whole thing, or if I can run or whatever, that to me feels more, feels most valuable. All right, I want to go back to one other piece. And so learning, you were breaking down the pillars. Learning was step number 2, and motivation was step number 1.
Yep.
It strikes me that so often, and maybe you have similar conversations, I would imagine you might, since you're such a prolific author, people are like, what books can I read? Right? We're at the start, we're just trying to get rolling. What works? What books do you recommend? And books are great, but it does strike me that learning is, I imagine intentionally for you, step number 2, motivation. So just maybe break that apart a little bit for me in, what is the role of learning in that process? Why does it come after? You just got to be excited, and I've actually never heard it. That's a very poignant way to say it, that, you just got to be fired up first, and then you can learn. So yeah, just like expand on that for me a little bit, again, specifically maybe through the lens of you as an author who has provided so much value in learning in this space for so many years. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. To me, it's as simple as this. Like if you have, I'm always doing these thought experiments. Like if you have identical twins, like one of whom is motivated to run, but doesn't know anything. The other one knows a lot about running and isn't motivated. Who's going to develop more? It's the motivated one. Like the learning will come, unless you're dealing with a moron who doesn't learn. Like that was me. Like when I started running at age 11, I was motivated, didn't know squat, but figured it out. Just like, well, all right, this doesn't work. I'm not sure what does yet. So that's it. Just like what's foundational. It really is that basic psychological hierarchy of needs. Like if you can only have one, and these pillars are not like video game levels where you're like, you complete one level and then like you're just somewhere else. Like, no, like you can work on all of these things together, but like the proportions will definitely differ just based on where an athlete is. I think, the athletes who come here to Dream Run Camp, like if they've read a book or two of mine, like they have this expectation that I'm going to be just like this uber nerd about like, training science and stuff. And like, I love to geek out on training science, but in terms of like what actually goes on here and where people see me putting my energy, it's like heavily weighted toward like the culture side, like what kind of experiences are people having, like because I know like they're only here for like a few weeks at a time and then they're off. So yeah, I want to do as much as I can in the time I have them, which does involve a fair amount of teaching. I try to figure out like, all right, what does this athlete not know yet that they're gonna need to know and impart that. But like what I can, in terms of like having a lasting impact on them, like just having delivering like a peak experience here where they just have these tremendously positive associations with running because of like how it went down while they're here, like the beautiful places, the challenging workouts, the human connections, like all that stuff can just be like rocket fuel, for an athlete. So like years later, they might not remember a thing I taught them about, training science, but like they're still like their relationship with running is really great. And it's partly because of the experience they had here.
That's incredible, man. I just couldn't agree more. That is great to hear. What is, let's round it out. So based on everything that we've talked about, or anything else that we didn't get to, what's the thing you want people to leave with if they walk away with nothing else from Matt Fitzgerald on this podcast? What do you want to impart to them?
Yeah, just getting back to that mastery piece. They say, comparison is the thief of joy. And, I very easily could have no joy in running now just because of like, like any comparison to past versions of myself as a runner would, not redound to the benefit of the runner I am now. But, there is a way of really being focused on just the next step in the process. Like I refer to it as like the feeling of ascending. Like I've always just like wanted to feel like I'm climbing in some way in life. So one of the reasons I'm glad I'm a writer. I actually got the writing from my dad too. My dad's 81, still writing, still improving as a writer. But like that's where you want to put yourself. Like forget yesterday. Forget maybe not tomorrow, but the day after tomorrow, and just think about like what am I doing today that constitutes progress or ascent? Because and that can look like a lot of different things, but almost no matter where you are in your running journey, like you can find a way to just feel like you're climbing from day to day to day, like. And that's what I'm doing my own way. That's what I recommend to any runner who would like to be running 5 years from now, 10 years from now.
So good. That's a great point to end on. Well, thanks, Matt. This has been a real pleasure. I appreciate your time, your expertise, and your contribution to the world of endurance sports. This has been great fun. Thank you.
Right on.